Thomas the Really Useful Engine. Thomas was a little blue tank engine who lived on the island of Sodor. He was a really useful engine who has his very own branch line. He had two coaches, Annie and Clarabelle. "Hurry, hurry!" they would say to Thomas as he pulled them through the countryside. Thomas had many engine friends. Gordon and Henry were big, Percy was small, and Edward and James were somewhere in between. The Fat Controller was the director of the railway. He was fond of all the engines, even though they sometimes made trouble for him. One day, there was a terrible storm. Thunder rolled and lightning flashed, and rain fell heavily all over the island. A fierce wind rocked the boats in the harbour and knocked down trees in the forest. The engines sat in their shed at the station, looking out at the storm. Henry the Green Engine did not like storms. He closed his eyes and hoped it would end soon. Suddenly, a strong wind blew, and a tall tree fell into the station house's roof. Crash! "Oh dear," said Henry with a shudder. The Fat Controller came at once to inspect the damage. Luckily, no one was hurt. "This roof must be repaired as soon as possible," the Fat Controller announced. He put Gordon the big express engine in charge. Gordon was quite pleased. "After all," he boasted, "I am the biggest, the fastest, and the strongest." James the Red Engine was annoyed. He wished that he were the one in charge. "I'm the one who's used to pulling trucks," he grumbled. "Off you go then," Gordon ordered James. "Fetch us some timber and bricks and new slate." The rain started again. It began falling into the station house. The train crew set out buckets so people waiting for trains wouldn't get wet. Everyone waited for James to return. The roof continued to leak, so the station master invited passengers to use his parlour as a waiting room. "Henry and Percy, go see what's taking James so long," Gordon ordered. Percy the small engine was eager to go, but Henry puffed off slowly. He did not like being wet at all. Now everyone waited for James, Henry and Percy to return. The Fat Controller was busy checking on the railway. "Are the train lines cleared for travel?" he asked the station master. Thomas was getting worried. Maybe the other engines were stuck somewhere. "We've got to help," Thomas said to his driver. His driver nodded. "Well, you do know your way around the island," he admitted. "Let's go." Full of steam, Thomas puffed out of the yard and down the tracks. "Peep, peep," he whistled. Gordon wanted timber, so James must have gone to get some, said Thomas. "First stop, the forest," his driver said. When they arrived at the forest, they didn't see James, but there was Henry, who had run out of steam and broken down. "I knew I shouldn't have gone out in this frightful weather," Henry said, coughing. Thomas's driver helped Henry's driver call for assistance. Then Thomas continued on his way. He was worried about Percy and James. "Peep, peep," he whistled, puffing along. Gordon also wanted bricks, he remembered. "Next stop, the clay pits," said his driver. When they arrived at the clay pits, they didn't see James, but there was Percy, stuck behind a large tree that had fallen across the tracks. "I'm just too little," cried Percy. "Even Gordon won't be able to cross that," Thomas said kindly. His driver called for a breakdown train to help clear Percy's rails. Then Thomas continued on his way. He was still worried about James. "Peep, peep." Gordon also wanted slate, Thomas said to his driver. "Next stop, the quarry," said his driver. When they got to the quarry, who should they spot but James? He was lying in mud on the side of the tracks. "Oh, no," James groaned. "Those horrible trucks are nothing but trouble. They pushed me right off the rails. Then they ran away." The rain had stopped now, and Thomas heard a whir from above. There was his friend Harold the helicopter, flying overhead. "I've spotted James's trucks," Harold called. "They're down at the harbour." Then Thomas heard another sound. Poop, poop! Gordon was steaming around the bend. "I'll help James," Gordon said to Thomas. "You go get those trucks." Peep, peep! Thomas headed for the harbour as quickly as he could. He heard the naughty trucks before he even saw them. Loaded with goods and laughing loudly, they were pushing and bumping one another. "Come back at once!" Thomas called sternly to them. The trucks stopped laughing when they heard Thomas. "We were just having fun," they said sulkily. "There's a job to be done, and you're making everyone wait," Thomas said. He made the trucks get in line and pulled them up from the harbour. All the engines steamed back to the station. First came Henry, then Percy, and then Gordon. Next came James, pulling the naughty trucks who had caused so much trouble. The trucks grumbled and mumbled as they carried the timber, bricks, and slate. Thomas puffed along proudly at the back of the group, and Harold the helicopter fled above all of them. Everyone was happy to see the missing engines, but there was no time to waste. The station still had to be repaired. Everyone pitched in and helped put up new beams made of strong timber from the forest. Crumbling bricks were replaced with new ones made out of clay from the clay pits, and the roof was patched with new pieces of slate from the quarry. Soon the station looked as good as new. "We must have a grand gala to celebrate," announced the Fat Controller. The guards and drivers hung up banners and bunting. Even the engines looked festive. The station master passed around tea and biscuits in the waiting room. "Congratulations to a job well done," said the Fat Controller. "3 cheers for Thomas! Hip hip hooray!" everyone called. "Thomas, you truly are a really useful engine."